Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Thomas Moore, who's here to share with us his new book, The Eloquence of Silence, Surprising Wisdom in Tales of Emptiness. While the idea of silence seems pretty radical for a lot of people, there's a great deal of wisdom to be gained from it. Today's guest is here to share just that. Thomas Moore is the author of 24 books about bringing soul to our personal lives and culture, and is a New York Times best-selling author of Care of the Soul. He has been a Catholic monk and a university professor, and is also a psychotherapist, influenced mainly by Carl Jung and James Hillman. His work brings together spirituality, mythology, deep psychology, and the arts, emphasizing the importance of images and imagination. So let's welcome to the show, Thomas Moore.
Thank you very much, Marianne.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. I've got to ask you, what inspired you to write this?
I've been thinking about it for many years, actually, because this idea of emptiness is really important to me, and silence has been a big issue all my life. So I finally got around to it, and I'm very happy to present it, and in this way, which I hope is easy to grasp, because it's not an idea that modern people think about very much, or if they do, they don't think about it positively. So I feel like I'm sticking my neck out a little bit with it.
As do all courageous people who like to push the boundaries of what's going on, of course. Well, and it's interesting because especially right now, we're hearing how just people are disconnected and not really communicating. Is that the same thing, or is this something totally different?
It's related, certainly related, because in order to really connect with another person, you have to listen to them. And that means you have to stop talking. And that's what I'm writing about. Stop talking, stop doing so much, and let things happen. That's the idea. Let things happen. And the idea of emptiness is one that is rather commonly known in the East, in India and in China and so on. But in the West, we tend to be interested in doing and talking a lot. Just think of all the words we hear all day long, and how many people are talking to us so forcefully and so fast. So if we adopted this Eastern idea, just in our own way and in a simple way, to maybe at times to stop and listen, and to see what it's like to be quiet for a few moments and see how much comes into you and how you actually connect with a person that way, I think we'd be much better off.
It seems almost like a dying art. So I'm so glad that you wrote this book, because most people, here in the US, at least to my experience, that they don't really listen. They're already formulating what they're going to say next. So there's always this half attention, half presence to what's going on.
I think that's especially true in public life. We are so exposed to what people are saying in politics and in show business and in business. These people are talking at each other so fast, you wonder sometimes if they're listening to each other. And I wish they would learn something from this idea of emptiness, that it's good to be quiet sometimes and not always to come up with a new idea or to rebut your adversary, but to listen to what they have to say and maybe take some of that in. I think it might be responsible too for the polarization that we have, that we don't listen to each other. We want to win the argument. Therefore, we want to have the last word. And in this philosophy that I'm representing, the idea is not to have a word at all.
Yes, it seems that there's such a visceral reaction to discussions nowadays. Being able to be in that present moment and listen, what a gift that is.
Yes, it does help you be present, to not to be doing so much. And it's not just in conversations, but I think if you can find places to go that are quiet, Certainly in nature, that's a very important thing. I know people talk about it all the time, but it's true. I think if you, no matter where you live, if you had some habit of finding a quiet place, that can slow you down. I think it's certainly good for you physically. It can slow your heart down and it can give you some calm, but also for your mind, which is moving so fast all the time. In other words, if we could kind of train ourselves by going into places that are quiet, then when we are with people or doing our jobs or being active, we can more easily find that quiet space in us.
Do people who tend to stay in the quiet areas have a hard time also when they're in crowds because of all the noise and all the chaos going on?
I do. I don't know about other people. I have a big problem with lots of crowds, and I don't feel too comfortable that way. But I'm just a quiet person to begin with, and I know not everybody's like me. It's a good thing. I am quiet to a fault, but I do love the quiet. I love quiet more than silence. You know, I love a quiet space. I don't demand silence. I don't require that. But I do like a quiet place where I can go and maybe be with somebody else. I love going for a walk with someone, and involved in each other, talking to each other. And there's a certain stillness that can come even when you're not alone, but that you can actually cultivate a kind of quiet between you.
Well, in your book, you talk about emptiness. What do you mean by that?
I mean something very simple. This is a concept that, as I was saying, in the Eastern world is developed very intellectually, philosophically, and so on. But I think of it rather simply. Most of my work, anyway, is trying to take complex ideas and make them digestible, and that's what I'm doing here with the idea of emptiness. So I mean it rather simply, so that let's say you're in a situation that is difficult, and probably the first thing you want to do is do something and or buy something. I think consumerism is a kind of a defense against emptiness and quiet. So the alternative would be to say, okay, I'm not going to do that. That's emptying yourself out momentarily in a very simple way. Okay, I'm not going to say what I'm tempted to say. I'm not going to purchase something so that I calm my anxiety. I'm not going to start doing things just to do them. I'm going to actually do nothing for a moment and see what happens. That is a very, I can tell you as a psychotherapist, that is a very effective way to deal with emotional issues. Not to have to rush into doing things and explaining everything, but just sitting and listening to yourself or finding somebody you can talk to who will listen to you too. So I practice this in psychotherapy. I don't do a lot. I listen a great deal. I don't give advice. I don't try to explain people and figure people out. I just sit with them and I give back to them what I hear and what I see, maybe some things I see that they can't see. That's a very quiet exchange. And I think that's one of the reasons that this kind of therapy is successful.
People are really craving to have somebody listen to them, wholeheartedly as opposed to interrupting and trying to figure things out. Is that why?
Yes, I think so. Just think about it when someone tells you, well, they say, my marriage isn't going too well, and I'm really feeling kind of bad about that. I'd love to talk to you about it. And you might be tempted immediately to say, well, here's what I think you should do. That's being too active. Maybe the first thing you could say is, well, tell me about it and I'll listen carefully. In other words, you're saying, I'm going to not do for the moment. I'm not going to do anything as you tell me more of what's going on with you. I think that is much more helpful and useful to a person than in immediately rushing to a solution that you think might work.
Get out of that fix it mode, right? So,
Oh, yeah, it's just something that's so natural in us. And I think especially in the modern world where we think we should fix everything and we should fix it as fast as possible. And if we don't fix it right away, and if we're not doing anything, we think that there's something wrong. I want to say in this book that there's something right about not doing so much. There's something right about not speaking so strongly. There's something right about just being quiet for a while and taking things in and letting people speak to you, and let them feel that you have an ear, that you can listen to them, and that you are essentially a quieted person. Someone who can sit still and listen to me without rushing into action.
you've done so much research for this book. I understand you've added folk tales and literature and spiritual practices. What was one that you would like to share with us?
I can tell you a story. One of my favorite, well, when I say that now, three of them pop into my mind. I'll have to think of one. I'll just take one as an example. There's a story where this spiritual teacher was in his village, and one of the villagers came to him and he said, I am going to have to move away now and move and live in another place quite a ways away. And it's been very important for me to hear your teachings. And he said, I've noticed that you wear this ring on your finger whenever I see you. And I thought maybe if you would give me that ring, every time I look at the ring, I'll think of you. And the teacher thought for a moment and he said, I have a better idea. He said, why don't I keep my ring? And now every time you look at your finger and there's no ring there, you'll think of me. So to me, that's really a good story of emptiness, because there you are, the ring, your finger is empty. There's nothing there. The teacher is trying to teach you something important, that you don't need something. Sometimes you need nothing. Sometimes you have to have an absence in some way, and that will have more impact than if you've got something. And I thought that's a story of a teacher who really knows what's going on and is using this theme of emptiness to help his student.
I really like that story. That's that's a classic.
It is a classic, and there are many stories like that in this book. I've collected 30 stories and passages from people's writings that are all of them are about emptiness. There's a tradition in other parts of the world to tell stories about literal things that are empty. I mean, like a plate might be empty, there's no food on it. You might go into a restaurant and the person you're waiting for doesn't show up, and you're faced with that empty chair in front of you. You can see these empty things as images, metaphors for a deeper kind of emptiness. And that's what these teaching stories do. So this little book of mine is not really a book explaining what emptiness is. It's a collection of stories with my reflections on how those stories tell us all these different ways that we can empty our lives in this positive sense and be much better off for it.
It seems that when people look at empty, sometimes they look at that as a negative as opposed to the positive benefits that that could be.
Well, yes, of course, we use the word empty. We think there's something wrong. If someone says, my life feels very empty, that's a pretty negative thing usually. So what I have to do in this book of mine is try to turn that around. And what I'm doing is borrowing from very ancient teachings. These are not my ideas. These are ideas that come from all over the world, different brilliant people who have come up with them over the centuries. And I think it's something missing in our life. And I think that it would be really valuable for us to be introduced to this idea that there's a way in which emptiness is a positive thing, and we can incorporate it into our daily lives for our benefit. We will be better off if we learn how to do that.
What is one way our listeners and readers can start just in baby steps incorporating that today?
There's so many ways. I'd say the first way might be to find a spot, some place that you like to go that's really quiet and it doesn't have much going on, and just spend a little time there. Maybe at first just 5 or 10 minutes, and just sit. Not don't do anything. Just sit and take it all in. and then see that as training for you then to be in a situation with people where you can apply what you learned there to be a quieter, to give yourself a moment or two without having to talk, a moment or two without having to have something happen, to just be there, just be present without having to do anything. The Tao Te Ching, which is a teaching document from China that I use in this book, it's a wonderful collection of wisdom. And it says that, that more is achieved by not doing. And that's what this book is about. We can achieve more in our lives actually by learning how not to do so much and how not to say so much.
It seems that we've been caught in this web of multitasking. And in many ways, this becomes a habit for people. And we even see people out walking, using their phones, or at lunch using their phones, constantly on our devices. And we're never really getting to this place of silence.
Yes, I would recommend no tasking sometimes. Instead of having to do so much, to multitask, see what it's like not to have any task at all, just for a while. Or maybe have that a part of what you're doing so that maybe you're doing something, but at the same time, you're not doing something. Now, that may sound obscure and strange, but all I mean is, let's say you're doing some task. Let's say you're cooking dinner. One thing you could do instead of turning on the radio to try to make your mind more active, try to do that work, the ordinary cooking, to do it in silence and notice what you're doing. Look at those vegetables you're slicing and smell the various smells of spices and foods that you're working with. The cooking can be a wonderful form of contemplation that can actually give you something very important for your life. And I can tell you, I know it's not doesn't sound very modern, but if you could learn these lessons of not doing so much, or maybe not doing anything as part of your ordinary tasks, that you would become a more centered person, someone who's not easily inflamed by emotion and caught up in one enthusiasm after another, but to be able to be self-possessed and have a better sense of what's going on around you and even make better decisions.
So there's a certain amount of liberation that happens within ourselves when we go through this
Totally,
practice.
totally. Liberation is the word. I think it's a very liberating thing to do this. I hope that it's clear that I'm not talking about taking a class in emptiness. You don't really have to do that. All you have to do is look at your life and say, are there areas in which I can not do so much or not think I have to accomplish so much? Are there ways in my daily life, everyday life, that I could maybe just have little empty holes? One of the quotes I have in my book, the quote is from the Tao Te Ching, again, from China. It says that what use is a house if it doesn't have doors? And what use is a room if it doesn't have windows? It's seeing the doors and windows as empty spaces. How important it is then for us too, as people, to have doors and windows, to have doors where ideas can come and go so that we're not always stuck with the same old things, and windows where we can have kind of a refreshing of who we are and our style and the things we do, the habits we have. The emptiness that comes in those moments can help us move forward. And that can be liberating because otherwise we're stuck in a lot of old behaviors.
Is a lot of that behavior something that's in many ways taught?
Yes, most things are taught to us, I think, or modeled. I think especially for children, they learn from what they see their parents do and the way their parents talk. So I think that in most cases, probably children learn a lot about doing a great deal and trying to explain everything and maybe explain themselves. They don't really learn this lesson about not doing so much, of not speaking so much. And if they did, they might be able to be calmer people and not have to fight all the time, always have an answer. always have a rebuttal for somebody, but to be able to just take things in and sit quietly and then just let life move on. That would be, I think, a real therapeutic development for the typical modern person who does too much.
Well, I think, unfortunately, you can count me as one of those folks. So when I was reading this book, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is a practice I really need to get in touch with." And I was so impressed. You have in your book the Heart Sutra, and you
Yes.
talk about it as being the very essence of emptiness. What do you mean by that?
Well, the Heart Sutra is it's like a psalm. It's like, or a hymn. It's like a long prayer, and it's recited all over the world by many people who understand this idea of emptiness. It's chanted. You can go on YouTube and you can watch the Dalai Lama chant the Heart Sutra. And if you get a good English translation of it, and I've provided one in this book, the word empty appears constantly. And it's as though it's trying to tell you, okay, now think about your mind, empty that. Now think about your voice, empty that. Now think about your hands. Get some emptiness so you don't have to do so much all the time. Think about your feet. They have to be empty. So you don't have to go places constantly. You can just be where you are for a while and just be present there. So I think that's what the Heart Sutra is about. It lists all these things in your daily experience that need to be empty. It's like saying there's nothing that shouldn't be empty in some way, to some extent. And if you could learn that, I know it's not easy. It's not easy for me to express this, to try to describe what it is in our world. But I think it's worth the effort. And my book is simple. It's not complicated, and it's mostly stories and very short reflections on stories that tell you how to apply this idea of emptiness in your daily life. I think that's what we need, and it would help us a great deal.
Do you have another story you could share with us? Because I know initially you said you had 3.
Yes, every time I think of one, I think of another one. Yeah, they're short and they're very simple. So there's a story. The character in some of these stories is named Nasruddin. They're Sufi stories from the Middle East. So Nasruddin is this teacher, and he goes to London, and he wants to ride in a double-decker bus. So he goes up to the upper level of the double-decker bus, and he's sitting there for a while, and the bus is going along. And he comes down from the bus and comes down to the lower level, and the conductor is there and says, "Is there something wrong, sir?" And he says, "Yes, there's no driver up there." So that story is very interesting. See, in order to grasp these stories, these traditional stories, you have to think metaphor. Think poetically, like you're a poet or you're someone writing a good novel, something like that. You don't want to be too literal about them. So here is this guy who doesn't want to be in the upper level of the bus because there's no driver. And I think that's the situation we are often in. We don't want to be in a position where no one's driving. As a therapist, I hear this dream very frequently from people. People dream about being in a car, and sometimes there's no driver. They get very excited. And we talk about it. We think, what is it like to live your own life where there's no one driving? When you're just going from day to day, and you don't know exactly, what direction you're headed in, but you're trusting life. You're trusting in life and allowing life to take you places that you are not able to control. I think the simple story is like that. There's no driver. There's no driver upstairs. Sometimes we talk about the man upstairs, it's meaning sort of God is up there or the divine or an angel is there or something. So it's that upper realm where there's no driver. So he has to come down where he feels more secure, where the driver is visible. I think that's where a lot of us are. We feel we can't just let life spin itself out and trust ourselves in life and try new experiences and go to new places. We want to be under control. We want a driver. So I think this story, as simple as it is, has a great deal to do with the way we live in this modern world.
Okay, that's a hoot, and I love that story. So, yes, it makes perfect sense when you think about it. It's like, gosh, here we are on the double deck thinking that there's no driver when we definitely have things in control regardless what we do.
Well, it's a bit of a joke, and that's great because this whole thing should be lighthearted. It shouldn't be too heavy. We should be able to reflect on our lives and these difficult situations we get into and not be quite so heavy and oppressed by them and depressed. And that's what I like about many of these stories. They have a very slight, simple kind of humor in them. And that helps us, I think, get the essence of what they're trying to teach us.
Well, Thomas, I was so impressed with your book. It's such a great read and really has one contemplating how we can live a better life just by being silent and being in the moment. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work and all of your other books?
Well, I've written 32 books now, so there are a lot of books out there in all the typical places, all the bookstores. And I have a website you can reach me at. It's called thomasmoresoul.com. Thomas More Soul, Soul, thomasmoresoul.com. And I teach an online course too, which is getting into all these kinds of things more deeply. And you can find that on my website. So I'm pretty active and engaged in the world and trying to do what we're talking about here today. Take traditional teachings from all over the world and make them intelligible and useful to us.
Well, Thomas, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne, very much for having me. It's I really appreciate it because this is pretty quirky business that we're talking about, and I think it's very brave of you, and I'm very, very grateful that you had me with you.
Well, thank you, Thomas. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Eloquence of Silence: Surprising Wisdom in Tales of Emptiness. The Eloquence of Silence is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. You can also purchase this book directly from the publisher, New World Library, at newworldlibrary.com. Make sure to visit Thomas's website at thomasmoresoul.com, be part of his community, check out his other books, and of course, pick up your own copy of The Eloquence of Silence. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.